All right, so this next example is a somewhat hokey example, but it's also a really good example on exploring some of these very fine-toothed, delicate details of these universal as well as these existential quantifiers. The idea is that if you can make some switches from something saying for all to changing it to a there exist, as well as changing the order of some of these things, it's going to have ridiculously large impacts on the overall statement structure. They can say very different things underneath just one small little change of a symbol can have enormous impacts on the actual statement. So in this case, we're going to be looking at 6 different statements. You can see that what's going to happen is I'm going to switch these things from saying there exist to universal statements, but the predicate and the players in play are always going to be the exact same. So in this case, let's introduce the cast of characters. We're going to be looking at all of our variables. In this case, all of my x's and y's are going to be coming from this collection of all people. Let's say people here on Earth. Likewise, we're going to be looking at the same predicate over and over and over again, which in this case is going to be this expression L of x comma y, which is going to say that person X loves person Y. So all of these statements down below are going to be talking about two people, X and Y, possibly loving each other. You're going to see that bringing in this idea of existence and universal expressions are all going to have very different changes to the overall statement. So let's go ahead and see what they're all going to look like in this case. First off, we're going to have this thing that's going to say there exists an X and there exists a Y such that L of XY is going to occur. I should mention that there's one just slight change of hand in this case, is that I'm being somewhat lazy on my notation. Rather than writing there exists an X in the collection of all people, I've actually dropped this notion of in P. The idea is that everything in play is all coming from the same gigantic universal set. So it becomes somewhat cumbersome to constantly say there exists X in P, there exists Y in P, blah, 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 over and over and over again. You know that all of these statements in play are all going to be talking about people. You can get sometimes a little bit lazy and just drop this notion on where this P or where these X's and Y's are coming from. You know that they're coming from this large set of all people. However, you can't be lazy if you actually have 2 different sets going on. The idea is that maybe you have a collection of people and the other one is a collection of dogs. I want to really make sure I'm talking about a person compared to a dog in some of these things. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually dive into these things. So the way this first one is going to read is going to say there exists some person, this person, let's call it X, such that once I now have this person X, I'm going to have that there exists another person Y, such that X loves Y. In this case, what's happening is that I'm going out into the entire world, I'm finding one person. That person happens to love another person. So that is going to say that this notion of love exists somewhere on Earth. Or I could kind of more formally say there exists a person that loves someone. Like I said, you can rephrase that in many number of ways. The idea is that this existence of love is going to happen somewhere on Earth. There is somebody somewhere that happens to love another person. It doesn't say anything about the number of people that they love or kind of where they are or any extra information about them. It's just talking about there is somebody that happens to love somebody else. It doesn't say anything about whether or not that person loves them back or anything like that. It's just the idea that one person somewhere loves another person. Okay, so what happens if I change that second thing from a kind of there exists into a universal or a for all quantifier? Well, what's going to happen here is that there's going to exist one person, at least one person, X, such that this person X has now been established. What's going to happen is that for all people then, X is going to love all of those people Y. So in this case, there's going to be one person that loves everyone. Okay, so do you see that slight order change in this case? I actually started with one person who happened to like somebody else or love somebody else in this case. What happens in the second one is that it's not just going to be the existence of some other person that they love. They actually happen to love every person, including themselves. This idea that X is also going to be an element of the collection of people, and when I'm cycling through all other people, they better be included as well. Okay, let's go ahead and see what happens if we switch the order of that universal with that existential quantifier. So if I put that universal quantifier out in front, and now I'm going to have this existence on the inside, you're going to see that this thing is going to change a little bit. What's going to happen is that on the outside, I'm going to have some statement that's going to say, for every single person. It's going to have to cycle through every person in the entire world. Well, what's going to happen is that as I'm cycling through this thing, it's kind of this overall giant for loop, I'm going to stop at, let's say, Bob, just some random person along the way. Now I'm sitting there holding Bob in this case, and what's going to happen is that I'm going to move into the second part of this expression. So for everybody, including Bob in this case, I'm going to be able to find another person. There exists a person, in this case let's call it Alice, such that X loves Y, or Bob loves Alice. So the idea is that no matter what person you grab out of that gigantic overall for loop, what's going to happen is that once I'm inside of that loop, I'm going to have the existence of something occur. So for every person in the entire world, there's going to exist another person such that X loves Y. That is going to say everybody loves someone. All right, so now what happens if we actually go ahead and put universal quantifiers for both pieces, no longer having this existence anywhere. So the idea is that I'm going to start off with a cycling again of everybody in the entire world, cycling through everybody in the entire world. Let's say I stop at Bob just for now. What's going to happen is that with Bob kind of in hand, what's going to happen is that I'm going to have to cycle through everybody again, and it's going to be this fact that Bob is going to love everybody. Likewise, I'm going to have that occurring over and over and over again for every single person. So what's going to happen is that everybody is going to love everybody. All right, so now it's going to start getting kind of weird. I'm going to actually be switching the order up. So you can kind of see that we've exhausted everything that we can up above. We can have exist, exist for all exist, or for all. And you kind of see this kind of slight change that occurs. You're going to have this kind of everybody or everyone situation, and then you're going to have this kind of existence side of things coming into play. What's going to happen is that I could also switch the variables on the inside of that predicate. Instead of having, the notion of there is one person, Bob, who happens to love everyone, what happens if that X occurs second? So let's go ahead and look at this thing. What's going to happen is that there's going to exist one person. Let's say that person is Bob. I'm not having to cycle through everybody. I just can go out and find one person, such that for everybody else in the entire world, what's going to happen is that all of those people in the entire world are all going to love that one particular person. So it's going to say there is someone, in this case we call this person Bob, that everyone loves. All right, so then what happens if we switch those quantifiers around in this expression? What's going to happen is that it's going to say for all X. So I'm cycling through everybody in the entire world. What's going to happen is that as I cycle through all of those people, I'm going to kind of stop at various people, and when I stop at a certain person, I'm going to move into that second part. So let's say I stop at Raymond in this case. So for all X, so in this case, once I happen to get to a person, there's going to exist a person. These people are going to be linked in this case, such that that new person that I just found loves that person X. So what that's going to say is that I can cycle through every person in the entire world. I can find a particular person that goes with them such that that person loves them. So that's going to say something about everyone has someone that loves him or her. So if I take anybody in the entire world, I can find somebody that loves them. So let's write that out. Everyone has someone that loves him or